Hi, Ken.
Hi, Garrett.
Welcome to the archive. How are you doing today?
Good. Great. How about you?
I'm doing good. So you did this PhD,
Master's thesis.
master's thesis.
Yeah.
You did a master's thesis, and it's on Alexandria, Egypt.
Yes. So right after Alexander the Great founded it, he went off to conquer the rest of the world, died, never really came back to Alexandria. So he dies, and then his four generals kind of split up the empire, and Ptolemy takes Alexandria and all of Egypt. Mm-hmm. And my thesis contends that Alexandria was founded on philosophic principles and revolutionized the world and how we think. In a lot of those ways have trickled down into us now. So I can read the abstract. It's only a page or so. I contend that Alexandria was founded on and governed by philosophic principles that reshaped man's worldview. When philosophy was first established in the 6th century BCE, many principles gradually developed into trends that expanded into areas of Hellenistic popular culture that spread well beyond groups of men contemplating the nature of existence. These fashions took the form of adaptations of existing technologies and concepts that facilitated philosophical pursuits, especially the inquiry into the nature of knowledge, the ability of man to reason, and addressing the issue of man's place in the universe. History, science, and scholarship are all byproducts of philosophic thought that combined an expanded perspective of man's place in the world with critical analysis and systemized search for truth. Alexander's conquest provided an ideal opportunity for these fashions to develop even further, and Alexandria became the perfect crucible for such developments to grow. So it wasn't just a regular capital city of an empire. It was designed to be that, but also reshape how the world would interact and how mankind viewed itself. So
this was also like a huge culture shift in the world too.
Yes. So for a couple hundred years, you had. So we're talking about. So Alexandria was founded like 320-ish BCE. It didn't really get up and running till about 40 years after that, 35 years after that. And right around then, you've got Athens, which had been defeated by Rome at that time, which was still a very prominent place in the Mediterranean world. And then Rome, of course. But for about 150 years, though, it was Alexandria that was the pinnacle of culture and civilization, except for the military conquest.
Okay. And Athens was also, from my understanding, like the birthplace of democracy.
Yeah. 509 BCE.
509?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
508.
So Alexandria even had an influence on Athens? Or...
So Alexandria's, this whole idea of taking philosophic thought. So I'm not really dealing with Alexander's conquest. I mentioned them, but this is an established empire by the time I'm writing about this. Was based on the philosophic thought from most of the Athenians. Mm-hmm. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, significantly, but there are other ones like Thales or Miletus and Eratosthenes and later on. But in that Greek world, so it took the concepts that were developed in larger Athens of philosophy and then incorporated into Alexandria and were allowed to foster in ways which really, I argue, weren't feasible in Athens. So Socrates, as most people know, was killed by the state for promoting anti-religious views, which he said he never did, but so corruption of the minds of the youth and just kind of denying the existence of the gods, which was never really. There's no recordings saying that. It's just what the state argued. So that says that your worldview is limited in how you could pursue knowledge. So the Athenian government was clearly uncomfortable with Socrates or anyone promoting that the gods really weren't responsible for the creation of the world or anything like this. So a large part of my thesis deals with an absence of religion, or at least an extreme religious tolerance amongst multi-religions, allowed for a new way of thought to emerge. So getting back to Athens wouldn't allow a lot of the things that happened in Alexandria to flourish because of the religious
perspective.
Dominance and just like you. But Alexandria, basically, so they had the traditional Egyptian gods. He created his own new god. This is Ptolemy, the first we're talking about. But it was arguably the world's first cosmopolitan city. It was the largest diaspora of Jews outside of Jerusalem. Well, not Jerusalem at the time, but Israel. And Babylonian scientists, people from all over the world came to study at the royal expense. So you've got this huge...
So it was the mecca of education for its time.
Yes, no question.
Okay. Did it have like an academy? Was it just the resources it had available to it?
So it was the institution was called the museum, which of course now for us is the museum. But the first one of its kind was there in Alexandria. So you've got all these scholars from around the world encouraged to come to Alexandria and study, paid for by the royal government of Alexandria. So you've got, like I said, Babylonian astronomers, and you've got Phoenician traders. You've got all these people from around the world in this think tank, allowed to live there free of charge, fed for free, and just study things. So you didn't have that restraint of religion saying, okay, you can research any amount of knowledge you want. Go just study everything, so long as the end result is...
It's because of God.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So this is the first time the world ever had the ability to freely think about whatever without it and concluding deities for once.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't think you can escape that entirely. So there were people who believed in traditional religions.
But explored thought outside of religion?
Yeah. Okay. Politically, you weren't going to be persecuted.
Okay.
Or at least I didn't come across anything to justify that people were holding back. So yes, right.
Okay. So was there something that constituted that? Was it just by government rule? Was it developed culture? Was it because of who Alexander the Great was?
Was there something that constituted what?
People being able to explore thought freely.
It was encouraged by the Ptolemaic reign. It was encouraged. They were paid, come here, study, see what you can come up with. So, like Archimedes, the guy, Eureka, I have found it. Like he was the Eratosthenes who, the father of modern geography, was there, kind of accurately calculated the circumference of the world at that time. And of course, you don't have a measuring tape to sail around the world in a straight line. So this is all done by just the ability to study. Now, not necessarily saying that could not have been done in Athens, where you had to respect Zeus as the king of all the gods. Not that Eratosthenes' computations were heretical, but you just had all these people together. Maybe some of that came from Babylonian astronomy at the time and whatnot. So to get back to your point about the freedom of persecution, you had, I think it was Thales. This was before Alexandria, but his thought is relevant to this conversation. So he accurately predicted a solar eclipse in 585 BCE. So just by observation of the stars and all, he predicted a huge olive crop too, which he made a ton of money on. So he's predicting these things that would happen that before were attributed to the whims of gods. All right, the sky god did this. Zeus wasn't happy with that. Ceres wanted, she wanted to give you good harvest and all that stuff. But now he's saying, no, it has nothing to do with these gods. This is just the cycle, and I'm telling you, we can observe this and we can draw our own conclusions.
Okay, and that examination of celestial patterns had never been looked at before.
I think it would be naive to say that completely, because astronomy has been around for a long time, and certain Egyptians were good with
but
cycles.
It hasn't been looked at scientifically in that way. Or looked at as, hey, here's a predictable science we can piece together.
Not in this way. I would say to a point, no. Maybe I think the next step was taken, for sure. Yeah, to a point, a degree, yes, for sure. So you've got all these things that are. The museum was, yes, there were. So we know a museum right now is a place you go to look at objects from antiquity around the world, and not necessarily to go to speak to the museum scholars. Museum scholars nowadays are behind the scenes. They don't interact with people. But the museum had the scholars, and there were artifacts that people could look at. So this was something that is a first. It was a collection of all the knowledge in the world. So Ptolemy wanted, so he would confiscate books from the harbor. Anyone coming into to Alexandria, he would take their books, make copies, they can have them back. But the Library of Alexandria was the largest in the known world. It had every book on every subject that he could get his hands on. And it was the first public library the world has seen. And people were allowed to come in. Thousands, and I think I found 700,000 scrolls and books were in there from every religion, every school of thought, organized in a modern.
Like a modern library.
Modern libraries got there. It was called the Pinocchi system of references from Alexandria. This was something they wanted to get all the great minds together, categorize them, store them, display them, and make them available to anyone who wanted to see this.
Okay, so this is where we got museums, public libraries, and essentially a college or academy-like system.
Yeah, I think the college was not necessarily...
Or early forms of what would be like a...
Yeah, of course. A think tank, I'd call it. Yeah, but yes, definitely. And so, more than just having the museum in the library there. So those two deal with gathering knowledge and expanding upon it. Another philosophical thought was the search for knowledge. The term theoria was Greek, and that was the first time a word was used to explain travel for travel's sake. So there had been people who had been traveling long before Alexandria for war campaigns, diplomatic liaisons, and of course trading. So, but those are basically it. Maybe you'd have some people go visit some relatives who, whatever, for one reason or another moved. But for the most part, that was travel. It wasn't like we have today, I'm going to go on vacation, I'm going to go here or there. Okay. Pilgrimages were...
very few?
They were there, but not... People go to Delphi and a couple other places, but not...
Not the travel like we have today.
Not the travel for pleasure. So the theoria was travel for travel's sake. And that's a couple hundred years before the founding of Alexandria as well. But that idea to go out and explore and experience the world is a philosophic pursuit and a philosophic fundamental. So Alexandria built the world's first lighthouse was in Alexandria. So you've got this collection of knowledge. You've got these people expanding on that knowledge, right? The library, the museum, and then now you've got this lighthouse, which of course just, on the simple level, just navigates boats safely into the harbor. But it was the tallest. I mean, it was a world wonder. It was a wonder of the world back then. One of the 7 wonders. So this is now a symbolic beacon to attract people to Alexandria.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. So, Alexandria was definitely the beginning of, like, the modern world.
In some ways, I believe so, yeah. Yeah, you've got religious tolerance. You've got just tolerance. It was the most cosmopolitan city of that time. Certainly before. I mean, you had other big hubs, of course. But
not like this.
Not like this.
Yeah.
Not like this.
There wasn't a place where people were trying out new things like lighthouses, that kind of architecture, that kind of design, that kind of building. People didn't have an educational center of things from around the world.
No, right. I agree.
We didn't have...
Not on this scale. Not even close.
Not even close. A public library.
Yeah.
That was the first one.
Yeah.
And an educational mecca.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. For sure. So you have, in that period of time, I wish I read this a little bit more. There were so many. So the first scientific autopsies on cadavers were performed in Alexandria. The first female mathematician
was there.
Hypatia came out of Alexandria. She didn't have these restrictions on gender, and you didn't have this taboo idea of dealing with cadavers. Now, obviously, Egyptians had been messing around with bodies for millennia before this, but it wasn't for knowledge so much as religious belief. They would take out the organs, preserve them, fill it with sweet-smelling things, and whatever else the pharaoh needed for their afterlife. But these dissections were to figure out what worked, what organs were maybe irregular to other organs based on the symptoms that the patient exhibited before they died. Like the first steam engine came out of the hero of Alexandria. Like the first, I think he also did the first vending machine. You've got so many concepts that are, we don't even think about in the modern day, that had their genesis in Alexandria.
All right. Okay, Ken. Well, I think I'll end it on this and ask you if you got a message for future generations.
Keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. Like, the pursuit of knowledge is just so... Just question, why do I know this? How do we know what we know? And not to get, too religious here, but if you follow a religion and that book, that canon says something, that's fine if you want to believe it, but you have to accept that there are other canonical texts from other religions around the world that make conflicting statements, and you just keep an open mind. Like, how do we know what we know?
All right.
Kind of a heavy note to end on, I guess.